The Senzo Meyiwa murder trial resumed this week with its fair share of drama in and outside of court. The existence of a second docket has put a spanner in the works. Docket 375 says there were no intruders on the night Meyiwa was murdered and that someone in the house ended his life. The Bafana Bafana captain was murdered in October 2014 in Vosloorus. 8 years later, 5 men stand accused of killing him, and our eNCA's Silindelo Masikane takes us through the week's proceedings. And Slee, finally some movement by way of getting to the merits of the allegations against these 5 men. After a long break in moving the case forward, we got the second witness to take the stand this week, and it's another police officer. But the biggest question I had watching him was, why is this police officer so mad? Why is he seems so upset? Tell me about his demeanor.
Yeah, Tula. So the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial, of course, resuming this week in the North Gauteng High Court after a 2-month break, if you can call it. And of course, it was to allow Advocate Zandile Mshololo to familiarize herself with docket 375 because the state, of course, failed to produce this docket or disclose this docket to the representative for accused number 5 before the trial started. Now, if I just take you back to the beginning of the week, Tulas, and then we can get back to the demeanor of the second witness. We, of course, then wrapped up the cross-examination and testimony of the state's first witness, finally, that is Sergeant Thabo Mosia, who, of course, we know collected evidence from the crime scene. And what we saw with Advocate Mshololo this week was her introducing hearsay evidence from a Brigadier Johan Ndlovu. He is late now and died earlier this year. And she introduced his statement through an application to admit hearsay evidence because he's no more. And this statement is actually contained in docket 375. It is not contained in this docket that is currently on trial. And in that particular statement to us, Brigadier Ndlovu basically contradicts everything that Mosia has been saying in court. Mosia has been claiming that Brigadier Ndlovu was the one who was showing him and helping him to collect evidence at the crime scene, but Brigadier Ndlovu's statement basically says the complete opposite. He says that he was not in charge of the crime scene and therefore could not be the one to actually be showing him what evidence to take. We have then moved on, of course, to now Sergeant Patrick Mtetwa. He forms part of the police officers who were actually the first responders to the scene. He was on duty that night at the Vosloorus police station, and along with 3 other of his colleagues, they responded to what was reported as a shooting in progress at Nomzamo Street at the Kumalo's family home. He says what's so interesting to us is that when they arrived at the crime scene, it didn't even look like anything had happened. But I think what has been noted, like you've said, is his demeanor on social media, a lot of commentary about how he seems to look like, 1, either he doesn't care, 2, he looks quite annoyed to be there, and 3, like you said, he looks quite angry. These are just some of the mixed reactions to his testimony, as well as the kind of attitude he's giving off in court. In fact, a few times he's been quite sarcastic, I think, with the defense. When they ask him a question, he'll ask one back, the judge having to kind of rein him in and remind him exactly why he's at court. He's representing the police service and what they did on that night. And so what's really come out of his testimony to us is the fact that it looks like there was issues from the very beginning in terms of the crime scene not being secured immediately on their arrival. In fact, Tetwa and his colleagues left the crime scene to proceed to the hospital, leaving the crime scene open to potential contamination. And in fact, it looks like that's exactly what happened. Let's take a listen to one legal expert in terms of the importance and the significance of actually securing a crime scene immediately.
I guess when they arrived on the crime scene, they probably didn't really know what had gone on. The rules are quite clear. If there's a serious crime has taken place, such as a robbery or a murder, the crime scene is supposed to be secured. And that would include using the yellow tape that you see put around crime scenes. And then you would have normally a uniformed person would be placed there. And that person would have a clipboard or something of that nature, or his pocketbook, and he would disallow entry into the crime scene except for authorized persons, and then he would keep a note of who came in and who left. So that apparently didn't happen. I have no doubt that with hindsight it could have happened, but you know, unfortunately, there's so much crime going on at the moment because of the evisceration of the South African police services by the government previously. We have a situation where literally on a busy night, you're running from one crime scene to another. And I think that was the case here.
Yeah, so a lot of focus being on how the crime scene was handled, Slee, and part of what I heard Mthethwa saying was that when they first arrived, they didn't even think of that house as being a crime scene, and only once they had been to the hospital and gotten a bit more information did they consider it a crime scene. What are experts saying about the importance of preserving a crime scene? Because I'm just, you know, there's been a shooting, you were called to a shooting, you arrive where the shooting happened, you don't consider it to be a crime scene. Quite strange.
Mm-hmm. And the defense has actually been raising this in their cross-examination to say that Mthethwa, as well as his colleagues, were simply not skilled enough to actually have been the ones to be the first responders. At the time, Sergeant Mthethwa was a constable, which is an entry-level police officer. But I think one would think that if you're straight out of the police academy, one thing you should know is that you should be able to secure crime scene immediately, especially if the call out is a shooting in progress. What was, like I said, what was interesting is that Mthethwa says when they arrived at the home, there was nothing that looked like anything had happened. He just said there were 2 cans of beer in the lounge. There were blood splatters here and there, but they simply didn't understand exactly where the shooting took place, which is why the defense is now trying to discredit his testimony to say that, but you form part of the problem as to why it didn't look like there was a crime scene, because we know from witness statements that were read out in court this week to us that various neighbors actually gained entry into the house while the police were at the hospital. And this is where we understand that one Maggie Peary began to clean up. She decided to tidy the empty bottles or the empty cans, telling other neighbors that they don't want it to look like people were drinking. We know that one statement also that was read out in court said that the neighbor who walked into the home noticed that there was water on the floor, and that surprised her because she was told that a shooting had taken place. And if you look at some of the pictures from the photo album that forms part of the exhibit, if you look at the kitchen, it doesn't actually look like anything really did happen. The floors are clean. You can't even tell where exactly Senzo Meyiwa was shot. So I think what experts are saying is that this is obviously going to hurt the state's case because, of course, the evidence that was collected is now being brought in. There are questions actually around the evidence that was collected. Let's take a listen.
All right, Slee, we're going to have to leave it there. We won't have time to take that excerpt weighing in on how the crime scene was or was not preserved. Extensive reporting. Look out for more of Silindelo Masikane's stellar reporting on that ongoing Senzo Meyiwa trial. At the top